Welcome back to Project Become. Today, I am rejoined by one of my favorite guests, one of my very, very great friends, Chak, aka Leslie. Welcome, my friend. How you doing?
I'm doing very well. Thank you very much for having me back on. It is an honor. It's a pleasure.
Absolutely. Anytime, every time. I love speaking to you. You've got great viewpoints, man. You've got interesting viewpoints. You've got controversial viewpoints.
Oh gosh.
I think you're, I'd say one of the few people in the world that actually think deeply to come to their own conclusions rather than just coming to the conclusions of the very smart people that they listen to. I think it's
Oh
easy
wow.
to listen to smart people, but I think it's easy to listen to smart people and distill and take whatever they said as truth.
Gold.
However,
Yeah.
I don't think, yeah, literally. But I think it takes certain kind of human being to like distill that a certain level of patience as well. So really, really happy to have you here, my friend. Yeah, you ready to get going?
Right. Right. Wow. That's quite the introduction. I hope I live up to it. I really, really do. I really, really do. Yeah. How are
Nah,
you doing?
we'll be good. Yeah, man, I'm good. I'm good. Like, I'm excited to get going again with Project Become. I think, I've again, like, not to just like sprinkle you with, shower you with praises, but like, if it wasn't for you, I don't think I would have been actually as motivated to get the series two ahead. So, yeah, I'm excited. I'm very, very excited for this conversation. For everyone listening, Leslie has already told me that he's had a few shifts in a few shifts, and I'm really, really, really excited to explore those shifts. So just to get straight into it, bro. What we had a big conversation, the last conversation, and you inspired so many people on my Instagram reels. I had a load of messages. I'm pretty sure that I sent a few to you,
Yeah. Yeah.
and obviously, we didn't do billions of views, but you definitely made an impact with what it is that you were sharing. Um, from what you were sharing, has anything shifted for you? Has anything changed, or well, what has shifted? What has changed?
Yeah. I think there's quite a few things that have changed, and I think that's the beauty of being human. Um, and that's probably my biggest issue with the state of the culture. It's so polarizing, and especially on which stances you ally yourself with. At times, people expect you to have those views, those beliefs, those ideologies completely solidified. There's never room for improvement, room to rectify, room to correct yourself. And even with some of our greatest thinkers, some of the people we hold in high regard that we admire, they're constantly changing, their ideas, they're changing their viewpoints. I mean, if we look at Malcolm X, he had for the greater part of his life these views on race and how things should be, and it was very tribalistic and very much segregated. And later on, as he explored life, and even went into the Muslim culture, he then completely changed his stances on his views on race, his views on white people. And you could say that, for the greater part of his life, he genuinely felt this type of way. And then in the latter stages, everything he stood for, he just decided, what, I was wrong. This isn't a healthy approach. This isn't a good direction. And yeah, I think that's really, really important because I did say in the last conversation we had, people just expect you to have this plethora of information, of knowledge, of wisdom, and you can't fuck up along the way. But that's the beauty of life. You have to go through the motions. You have to experience trial and error. You know, I saw a quote. It could have been actually yesterday or the day before, where it was like, "You're only an expert unless you failed at every single attempt." You know, and some of the wisest people that I know, it's not necessarily that they are the most successful in their field. It's because they've taken the most L's, they've encountered the most trials and tribulations along the journey, and they're now at that point where they're able to give advice and perspective from every single angle. And yeah, I don't think life should be like that. And it goes to the saying, you know, the wisest person at the room isn't the one with the most accolades and achievements. It's the one who's made the most mistakes. You know, and I think that's really important. And yeah, going back to your first question, yeah, I've changed my mind on a lot of things. Like, one thing that I've learned is that I'm actually not on the political center. I think I would define myself as someone who is apolitical. And I think from our last conversation, the way I defined being on the center and what it means to be on the center is I was wrong and I was completely off. You know, I think I'm more apolitical than I am on the center because I'm privileged enough to be in a position where, because of my geographical location, there's certain issues, there's certain problems that don't directly affect me and ultimately will never affect me. And I don't have to be as heavily invested as other people in other parts of the world with having to ally themselves, you know, to a certain political party, you know.
Yeah. Can you expand on like what those things are that your neck of the woods doesn't necessarily have to deal with, that other people would be in direct contact with on a day to day?
Well, for a start, we live in the western part of the world, and there is a group of people, a small group of people, who would want you to believe that you have to be invested, you have to care, you have to be paying attention to what's going on, and more importantly, you have to pick a side. I don't necessarily think that's the case. Now, I'm not saying it's ignorant, or better yet, should I say, I'm not saying that you would be foolish to pay attention to what's going on in politics and have a good understanding of what's going on in current affairs in the socio-political state of the world. I think it's very, very important. What I'm saying is it's not an absolute must. It's not an absolute must, because what I mean by what I say is it doesn't directly affect us. First up, we don't live in a part of the world where there is authoritarian demagogues who are trying to dictate the state of the country. There aren't authoritarian demagogues who are trying to enforce their ideas upon you. If you choose not to pay attention to politics, you can still have a very healthy and peaceful life. You know, I can keep voting for the same party, the same leaders, local MPs, and so on. And obviously there will be repercussions and consequences to that, but it won't have a drastic effect where the world will literally collapse or the small town that I live in, you know, is going to burn down. You know, and we gave the example of what it's like in our motherland, Zimbabwe, you know, where you do have to be consciously aware of what's currently going on. You do have to be invested because your livelihood is at stake. If you don't vote for those authoritarian demagogues, you're putting your own life in jeopardy. You're putting your family's life in jeopardy. You're putting the life of your loved ones in jeopardy. You know, the complexion of the political landscape in an actual country that has authoritarian demagogues who are trying to run a tyranny and create a tyranny is completely different to the world of the West. You could choose not to vote here and still step foot outside. We know for a fact that in, you know, well, to the best of our knowledge, in the less economically developed countries of Africa, if you don't vote for that authoritarian demagogue and their party, they're going to come knocking at your door. They are going to beat you up. They're going to kill you. They're going to hurt you, your family, and your loved ones. So yeah, I don't necessarily have a great interest in politics unless it directly affects me. Whereas I think if you're apolitical, you would still be very much consciously aware. You're up to date on what's going on, but you're not necessarily going to pick a side. You might agree with some points of the left, you might agree with some points of the right, and that's about it. Whereas if you were to ask me, about the manifesto of a certain party, I will just be like, bro, I can barely spell out the word manifesto.
Manifesto.
So
that's really interesting you say that, because I guess what really comes my way when you say that is I would classify then the majority of people being apolitical, and then they live their life based on what they know or what they've been taught that the cultural manifesto of being a conservative is, the cultural manifesto of being a Labour supporter is, the cultural manifesto of being a Liberal Democrat, and so on and so forth. So, and I understand that there is, and I believe that many people in the West already have that, removal from politics, and they believe, especially the most patriotic of people, believe that if you do vote, that's when that's what really matters. And people then religiously align themselves to Democrats, Democrats or Conservatives, or in the UK, Conservatives or the Labour Party. So I guess, what is it? Is it just about the freedom you feel that allows you, that's giving you that new insight, or is it that you feel that there's no difference will be made in terms of your actual quality of life, or is it just all nonsense? Like, what is it really?
I think it's definitely freedom, and like I said when I first explained myself, freedom is a luxury, and not many people have that privilege and that luxury. I wouldn't say it's something that's unimportant or stupidity. I think for any functioning state to run proficiently, there have to be people elected, and with those people elected, there has to be a group of people that can help assist them in their aspirations and their goals to make the world, or the said state, even more proficient. Absolutely. I think politics is very necessary. But the thing is, with the culture and the way it's being shaped, is that not necessarily in politics, just with a lot of things in general, for it to gain traction, for it to gain attention, you have to get the most, not necessarily the most extreme, but it has to be quite a polarizing stance that gains traction. And it's the same on the other side. So how I feel is I feel like there's about 60% of the majority who are invested, but they're not willing to die on a hill. And then there's another 20% on this side, and then there's another 20% on this side. And it kind of goes back to that thing of, okay, how I see it is, I feel like we're in the region beta paradigm, and or better yet, we are the people who are heavily invested in these matters and these issues that they want us to care about are in the region beta paradigm. And what the region beta paradigm is basically, if you want to get somewhere that's a kilometer or less away, you might choose to walk it. But if you want to get somewhere that's maybe 3 kilometers or more, you might choose to drive. So paradoxically speaking, that means you're going to travel faster at 3 kilometers than you are at 1 kilometer. So the meaning to that is sometimes it takes a worse situation than a good situation for you to act and make a change. And the beta paradigm the region beta paradigm, can be applied to many areas of life. You know, maybe you're in a relationship, you're not that happy, but it's actually not that toxic. So you can choose to be with her or him. Perhaps you're in a job that you hate, but then again, the boss isn't a total dick and some of the perks are really, really nice. You know?
Yeah.
Maybe you want to move to your own place, get your own flat, get a mortgage on a house, but your current living quarters, you know, the mold on the ceiling isn't too bad and, you know, rentals are quite cheap in regards to living standard. But if those things were to change, maybe if your abusive boyfriend or girlfriend, husband or wife was a lot more toxic and maybe more physical, that might wake you up into being a lot more invested in contemplating the idea of ending that relationship and moving on. Maybe if your boss was a complete arsehole and you didn't have that good paying hourly rate, you might consider to get a new job. Maybe if the ceiling did fall through in your current living accommodation, then you might want to get a mortgage or get your own flat and so on. So that's what I mean by the region beta paradigm. Sometimes we need to be in region beta for us to act forward, kind of thing. And with a lot of the conversations that are in the socio-political sphere, is you'll normally see a very genuine and very valid matter that's being discussed. And at the end of the post, the tweet, the article, video, whatever it may be, why isn't anyone talking about this? Well, because we're not yet in region beta. We're not yet in that position where we really do actually have to care. Because let's take one thing that mine and yours generation, even the younger generation, we're told that, you know, the millennials and Generation Z care about global warming like no one else has ever done. We're so much more heavily invested. And I'm not undermining the threat of global warming. But you have a lot of people in the West, not just here in England, saying, you know, we need to act now. And let's just focus on Great Britain for a second. Great Britain produces 2% of the CO2 emissions released all over the world. So what does that mean? If Great Britain was to sink into the sea, nothing would change at all. The countries and the continents that are going to directly have an impact and that can actually catalyze and change the state of global warming is Latin America, China, and India. But those places are full of people who are starving, who couldn't care about that because they're more worried about providing for their family, who are more concerned about shelter, warmth, a stable source of income. And it goes to that thing of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You know, sometimes you have to deal with the physiological needs that are at the bottom of the hierarchy before you can address the philosophical needs that are at the top, like a sense of belonging, pursuing a romantic relationship, being with a partner, and giving onto the world, you know. So, yeah, if we were all in region beta and it was as bad as we wish it to be, then we'd act. But most of the things that we're going to be talking about throughout the course of this podcast, only a handful of people care. Only a handful of people are still invested. You know, Black Lives Matter now. Are people still talking about it? Are people still talking about the war in Syria? Free Palestine. Slaves in Libya are still very much a thing. You know, there's so many travesties going on in the world. And again, that's not to invalidate them and to undermine them. The more I actually state them, the more you actually realize that, no, these are serious problems. So, yeah, it's only the really extreme sides of the spectrum that are really, really invested in these conversations and these issues. So, yeah, I am very lucky and I am very privileged to be in the position that I'm in, living where I am. But am I going to have an instantaneous effect on global warming? Am I going to switch off the lamp that's helping me produce good light for this podcast? No, I'm not. Am I in the position to go tell my neighbors, my friends and family to get electric cars? Am I going to stop taking the train when I go to London and Manchester? Absolutely not, kind of thing. And it's more, I think what then scares people off being that heavily invested in these issues and these, again, very valid problems that are going on in the world is that if you're not with us, you're against us. There can't be an in-between. There can't be a conversation where it's, do you know what, Washi? I actually do agree with what you're saying, but I've kind of got this to deal with. That's it's like, nope, you're the enemy. If you don't repost about this, you're an idiot. You know what? Silence is violence.
Yeah. What I find so incredible about those type of people, or what I've noticed from those type of people on social media, should I say, is that they will talk about or voice on each issue that's going on in the entire world, yet they will ignore and I'd say almost overlook people's personal issues in contrast to what's going on in the world. They lack that same level of empathy and understanding that they share to that they share to the rest of the world, rather than their own comrade, their own neighbor, their own people around them. And it occurs as it's just so strange to me. It's just so strange to me that there's an instant level of judgment by the same people that ask for no judgment, that ask for help, that ask for consideration. And it's confusing. It's what's coming up for me is selfish. What's coming up for me is inconsiderate. What's coming up for me is, yes, it's just not very nice, is it?
Well, I'm really glad you said that. And again, I'm actually going to revert back to a point I made in the last conversation we had. You know, you're right. It is selfish, and it's a good thing it's selfish. You know, there is the very definition of prejudice alludes to selfishness. You know, you can't have preference without prejudice. There is going to be preference and prejudice in the battles that you choose to take. Whether it's the romantic interest you choose to embark on, even the humanitarian work, the philanthropical work, there's going to be so much prejudice in everything that you choose to do. Why is it that you're focusing over Black Lives Matter as opposed to, you know, the war in Ukraine? You know, maybe it's because your family is of Ukrainian descent. Maybe you choose Black Lives Matter because you are black, or your partner's black, your boyfriend or your girlfriend, husband or wife is black, your best friend is black. You know, so you have an element of, because it goes back to that thing, okay, given that you're a human being, you're going to be fixated in one place, one geographical location. You are not a god, you can't be omnipresent, which means that your bias and how you perceive the world is instantly going to be tainted.
Yes,
And
of
more
course.
times than not, it's going to be tainted and biased towards the things that best suit you and best favor you.
Mm.
You know, a good person takes care of his or her family. What does that mean? It means that they're going to choose their family and their friends to outsiders and people that they don't know. Is that a bad thing? Well, maybe, but I think a good person would choose to take care of his friends and family and loved ones. I think that's a pretty rational, logical take. And then again,
Mm.
going back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you know, most people are going to address and choose to take on the physical needs, food, warmth, shelter, and so on, before they get to the psychological, philosophical needs as well.
Yeah,
So,
just to touch on the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. The reason why the needs is that he created such a table is that he's saying that people cannot, like physically, cannot advance to the next level if they're worried about lower level needs, because those lower level needs will consume them. It will consume their existence. It's almost like right now it's like Wi-Fi is like it's like a huge human need, right? Without Wi-Fi you can't function, you can't remote work, you can't work remotely, you can't do all these things, meaning that you're going to be consumed about how is it possible that am I going to get Wi-Fi, which is a luxury. If we're talking about third world countries, I think they're consumed about how they're going to get food, you know. And until you achieve that level per se, you can't move on to the next level. So yeah, I just wanted to touch on that because it's actually a really, really vital point.
yeah. So it's very, very interesting, and it's a great misfortune, you know, that some people can't see that, you know, some people have other things to address to, kind of thing. And again, I am not. Why I'm saying I'm apolitical again is because when you're apolitical, you have no interest, or minimal, should I say. But I think a healthy stance or a better approach to this would be to look. There's a lot of things that the right get well, and there's a lot of things that the left get well. There's a lot of things that conservatives are very much correct about, and there's also a lot of things that conservatives are very wrong about. There's a lot of things that liberals are very correct about, and there's a lot of things that liberals are also very wrong about. Now, I like to listen to both sides, and I think with my lack of knowledge and minimal information on certain subject matters, that would be the rational, logical thing to do. And there are going to be times where I agree with the left, and there's going to be times that I agree with the right. There's going to be times that I disagree with the left, and there's going to be times that I disagree with the right. And I'm going to quote one of my favorite comedians and geniuses, George Carlin. I read this quote in the book, The Wisest Person in the Room. And in the opening chapter, it talks about the objectivity illusion. And what George Carlin said was, have you noticed that when you're driving on the motorway, everyone driving quicker than you is a madman and everyone driving slower than you is an idiot? You know, if you're driving on the motorway and I ask you, like, Washi, do you want to speed up or slow down? A good response to my question would be, well, Leslie, it depends on the situation. Am I in a position to do so? You know, do I need to speed up or do I need to slow down? And what George Carlin said can be very much applied to a lot of things going on right now. It's all about perspective. You know, there are some people that do need to speed up, and then there's some people that need to slow down. And then there's some people who are just okay and content with the positions that they're in. And I think it's again, this is where the left can be very much correct. There are situations, there are problems, there are current dialogues that we do need to improve on, that we need to progress on. And then the conservatives can get it right when they say, we need to slow down. Louise Perry spoke about how when you start to over progress on things, eventually you're going to come back down and actually go backwards. And you can see this in certain groups that once started out to be for minorities, and then they wanted to be for everyone. That's when they're at the top of the curve. And I would say, no, if you act like that, you're actually not for us, you're actually against us. So then, like I said, that's when on the curve it starts to go down. Where you start to go backwards. And it makes you wonder, eventually I do completely get that. And it's in business studies where you talk about the Kaizen process, of how the Kaizen process in the most concise definition is continual improvement, where you are focusing on what works within the business, what's the best and the most effective way to be pro-efficient, and then you're stripping away anything that's unnecessary. But obviously, we'll get to a point where you can't improve the system anymore. It's as perfect as it can be. You don't want to destroy that and then go backwards. So, yeah, I think a good take or a good stance to have on a lot of these conversations is, to listen to both sides of the conversation, to see it from all stances, and then formulate your own idea, have your own opinion, and then walk away from it.
I guess that's definitely a really, really great way to keep yourself out of the out of the world of being consumed by one specific thought, being consumed by one specific idea, or as Gadsard would say, parasite, right? However, I guess, how do you distill and process the information that you receive? Because it's one thing listening to quote unquote right wing podcasts, quote unquote left wing podcasts, and doing it that way. Yeah, how do you distill the information that you get without getting into a headache, mate? To put it simply.
That's really interesting, and you've actually answered your own question. So it's just that I'm not. Let's be honest. The American political social state is so much more interesting and exciting than the English and British political socio-state. I'm just more invested in what goes on in America. It's more exciting. It's more comical. So, I do listen to a lot of political commentators that are on the right, but then I also do listen to a lot that are on the left. I listen to Candace Owens, I listen to Ben Shapiro, I listen to Matt Walsh, Crowder bits, but then I also, especially for like the pop culture side of things, I listen to a lot of left-wing YouTubers. I like FD Signifier. I don't know if you've heard of him, but he does a lot of video essays from a black man's perspective. And he's openly left-leaning. There's another black girl I listen to, Khadija. And then I also listen to a lot of, surprising enough, British YouTubers like Kidology and this other girl called Patient Zena, who are really, really good. And they're more of a neutral, apolitical stance, or just centered in their take kind of thing. So, on certain topic matters, I will try and listen to both sides of the coin. Even if I already have formulated my own idea, I'll try and listen to what they have to say. And then I might listen to another person. Because on the more light-hearted stuff, for example, I really like, as you know, Abra and Preach. They have really good takes. They're really, really good. And then I also like Playback. Agent and Low. They have really good, really good takes. And the nice thing about Agent and Low is they're much younger. They're like in their early 20s, and they're very smart for their age, but they have these really good takes. And it's like they'll even pick up on things that Abram Preach didn't pick up on whilst they're discussing the exact same topic. And they are seeing it from the scope of a younger audience. And it's like, right, okay, that makes sense. And then when you listen to Abram Preach, you know, it's from a much more mature conversation. And then I like to formulate my own opinion and that. And I'm not necessarily saying that my opinion from all of that is going to be correct, but it's just nice in the sense that, like, I'm at a point now where I enjoy having conversations with people who I don't necessarily agree with, but I just like to see their thought process. It's something I appreciate a lot more, you know, because I'll always be of the belief that not only should you do the right thing, but you should be able to explain why you're doing the right thing and why you stand for your causes. You know, it's like, Washi, why are you giving food to that homeless person, or why are you giving the money? You shouldn't just be able to say because it's the correct thing to do. You should be able to, like, no, this homeless person could go hungry, they could starve to death, they could die. I'm giving them my jacket because it'll provide them warmth. Like, just being able to formulate some sort of an ideology or have some sort of thought process as to why you don't necessarily want to be an NPC or just like a bot that's just, you know, following the crowd.
You want to derive thoughts of your own, come to your own conclusions, so that you get to explore life, so that you get to actually generate meaning for yourself rather than being told what's important. And ultimately, how I see it is like really cultivate a sense of purpose in your very own existence that's not derived from a bullshit sense of meaning, like being an NPC, you know?
Yeah, because there's a lot of people that I hold in high regard, that I revere, and I follow them religiously, but they are not my God. They are not everything that they say is gospel, because ultimately they are humans. You know, they are also susceptible to making mistakes. And the issue with that, again, is you're expected to think a certain way, and the people that you might want to hold in high regard, who you might want to seek for guidance, once people figure out that you hold this person in high regard, it automatically means that you agree with the person on every single thing that they say. And that's what puts me off the conversation. One person that I really hold in high regard, who you know, is Jordan Peterson. You know.
Yeah.
And a lot of the people that we are going to be talking about throughout the entire course of this conversation have far more experience and intellect in a lot of the conversation posts that we're discussing. But again, like I said, they're human and they're susceptible to making mistakes. So going back to Jordan Peterson, he's drastically changed my life for the better, and I've learned a lot from him. But again, he's still human and he's susceptible to making mistakes. And it was last year where he had a bit of backlash for adding a girl for post, a very beautiful model, in my opinion, for a Sports Illustrated cover. And he basically went on a tangent of how this isn't beautiful, and if you think otherwise, you're an idiot, don't at me. Roughly speaking, that's what he said. And received quite a lot of backlash. And you had diehard Jordan Peterson fans who are trying to justify and side with him, and then you have another group of people that are completely disgusted by him and wanting him cancelled. And then within that group of people who don't agree with what he said, they will instantly see him as who won't even want to affiliate with anything else that he has to say because of that one incident. Kind of thing. And in that situation, I had a lot of people who messaging me, you know, saying, oh, look at what your boy JP's done. You're a fanboy. And I'm like, yes, I hold him in high regard and I do appreciate a lot of what he said. But I'm not going to say that I'm a fanboy as such. You know, I 110% disagree with this. And they were shocked. And it's like, yeah, you can disagree with someone who you hold in high regard. And on that issue, I even explained why. I was like, look, to me, beauty is subjective, you know? And
Well, to your point, bro, it actually speaks to the parasite that's in the world right now, because people idolize people 100% for sure, right? But people idolize people who hold other things in high regards that you can't criticize, that you can't take advantage of. If I look at like someone like AOC, I forgot what her real name is. She's
AOC,
someone.
yeah, the politician.
She's someone who, yeah, the American politician. She's someone who's made some questionable moves in her career, yet because of the things she stands for, she's held in high regard, and the type of the pedestal she's on it's almost impossible to kick her off. And I'm going by this by, let's call it majority consensus. And when it comes to like incidents like what you're sharing with Jordan Peterson, it's like, well, because he's already someone who's split dead in the middle by what is generally accepted by society, ideas that are generally accepted by society, and so on and so forth. It's almost as if, well, even if you did agree with him, you're going to get your backside ripped a new one. And if you don't agree with him, on that point, you get to live another day until something else comes around, you know. And it's interesting that even though it's interesting that even though you can disagree with human beings, it's like the majority of people that I see on in a certain space are exempt to a certain type of slander. Like, again, another great example, a guy who I love so much, Bernie Sanders. Like, he's another person that's always like completely exempt to any type of slandering, because of his politics and not his politics, but his ideas about politics, and his ideas about money, and the type of backing he has around him, and how virtuous his ideas are, should I say, you know. And it's almost as if you don't have a leader who stands for something that is consensuously virtuous, there is no you've got no pot to piss in, you know. You've got no support from other people. They're just waiting for you or that person to make an error, and then you get punished for that error as well.
Yeah, that's pretty much it, because I think that's where we get it wrong. It's, you can still learn good from a bad person, and you can still learn bad from a good person. You know, I think there's a catalogue of historical figures, and even figures currently right now, who fall to that analogy and that example. I'm not going to go down the tangent of Hitler was a great leader for obvious reasons. Shout out Kanye. But yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, I just think it's, at the end of the day, no two people are the same. And I think if you were to sit down in a room with someone, maybe even someone who you've known all your life, maybe it's your mum or your dad, grandma, girlfriend, boyfriend, husband, wife, best friend, whoever it may be, you'll quickly realize that you probably have a lot of dissenting opinions on a variety of topics, and you're not as close. And I think in this world now, it's, you have to think exactly like I do. You have to be perfectly intertwined with my ideologies and my beliefs for us to coexist and contend in absolute harmony. And I completely disagree with that fallacy, and I don't think that's how life should be, you know. Especially in the more romantic sense, you know, there's always been that saying, you know, that opposite attracts. And I think,
wait, I was sorry to interject. I was hoping you'd say this, because there's actually been a study that's come out, right, that people who date each other, like the majority of people who date each other, actually, the lasting relationships are people who are very, very similar in temperament. So it's like, you get, let's say you get, obviously you have, let's say, masculine man and a feminine woman, or alternatively, you can have a very masculine woman and a very feminine man. However, what those people's interests are, and those people's how do I say it, joint outcomes are, or what they want to be, they're so similar that those people find themselves in perfect harmony. So it's not necessarily opposites attract. I think that was just like a selling point for more people to start dating, to be honest.
Well, I'm going to try and defend my point, because what I mean by that is there is beauty in opposites attract, not just necessarily from a romantic level, but
yes,
it's nice to have, and it's very refreshing for you to have different takes and learn something from someone else. Because at a point, it will eventually get to a point where it's stale. Because ultimately, how will you grow if you are not throwing yourself out to new information, to new challenges? Because that's the biggest issue with the current state of the culture. People are just affiliating themselves with the side that they agree with the most, the side that makes them the most comfortable. And with a lot of these issues, it's ultimately down to dialogue. It's down to conversation and being able to sit down with the opposing side, or the side that has a dissenting viewpoint or opinion to you. Because a lot of these issues that they haven't been fully. The nice thing that I liked about the Vice conversation that was last week or the week before.
Is it the men's one or the women's conversation?
The men's one on defining masculinity, understanding what
I think it was. Yeah, I think it's last week. Yeah.
I'm going to use that one because I like that one a lot more to the feminine one, because it had a lot more structure and they were able to express their viewpoints a lot more. But seldom will you find a group of people, not necessarily just men or women, but just a group of people who have dissenting opinions that are very vocal about them and that are willing to stand with them, but are still able to sit down in a room and express their points. And the Vice talk with men discussing what masculinity was, it was so refreshing because there were so many different types of men with different backgrounds and different life experiences who, had very much dissenting opinions and were willing to down them, but they were still able to get them out there. And they were able to receive some pushback, and they were able to receive new information and digest it and grow from it. And that doesn't happen a lot nowadays. And that's probably a great issue. And it goes back to that freedom of speech idea. Because, if you are pro freedom of speech, people will see you as, someone on the alt-right, a white supremacist, or something daft like that. And it's like,
sorry, bro. Just before we jump into this, right? I'm really thinking. I just don't think that, because I have conversations like this on a, let's say, on a weekly or monthly, because I don't really go out that often. But when I do go out, I manage to have these conversations. And when I do have these conversations, a lot of the time people start off very apprehensive. They start off very shaky. Yet once you, especially if you've already built rapport with them as oh, this person seems like a really nice bloke, and he seems like he's not a weirdo or anything like that. Once that has been established, a certain level of friendship and camaraderie has been established, and you get into those conversations, what it occurs for me is that people are willing to have the conversation, tread lightly, and find that common ground. Obviously, the conversation can get heated, but I'm under the impression that the world is a lot more reasonable than what social media makes it to seem. Because I feel just what you're saying about the 40%, I feel like the 40% is on Instagram, is on Twitter, is on Facebook. and
Yeah, yeah.
everyone else is just living their life, no problem. So
Well, that's the thing. The people with the most polarizing takes that gain traction are, you know, the 20% that's on one side, and then the 20% that's on the other.
yeah.
And well, going back to that point, like, I don't think there should be an issue with conversations getting a little bit too heated and a little bit too ferocious, because
Mm,
the reason why I'm a purist when it comes to freedom of speech is negotiation beats war. And
yeah.
it's better you know how I think, rectify, correct, or even understand those ideas before they become a physical manifestation and embodiment of those ideas and beliefs. And then they truly do become something detrimental and dangerous to society as a whole. You
Mm,
know, knowing that I am a racist and I want, or I'm transphobic and homophobic and all this kind, I have all these bigoted thoughts, and I'm letting
mhm,
you know, and just sitting me down and telling me and educating me why that's a bad idea is much better than I go and physically express those ideas and beliefs. That's what I
mhm,
mean by negotiation beats war. It's better you know how I think and why I think, rectify and correct those ideas, and then change them.
mm,
Because that thing that you said is like that you just pointed out in your point before I butted in was you actually end up knowing that, wait, that actually wasn't that bad. I'm sure you've had like, maybe I'm just the only person. You're in the shower and you know you're planning the argument in your head, and you're like, yeah, I'm going to say this, I'm going to do this, and then if this goes wrong, then you actually have the conversation. It's actually a lot more civilized. You actually have a lot more nuance, and it's like, oh, okay, that's not so bad.
mm,
That's actually really interesting, because the other point, to add to my point why like freedom of speech is so important, I wanted to give this example last time, but it's actually more relevant now because he's got a big platform and he's interviewed a lot of controversial characters. Is Piers Morgan on his show Piers Morgan Uncensored.
mm.
Even before Piers Morgan got kicked off, quit, whatever, of Good Morning Britain, I always used to say to people, I really like Piers Morgan. I really like Piers Morgan, and, you know, his courage to ask daring and controversial questions, because in
Mm.
order to think, you have to risk being offensive, and there's no point in asking something that people already know the answer to. It's like, why do you think the way that you think, or why do you stand by what you stand? Why did you do this? And he has been the perfect embodiment of that approach, and I think it's very refreshing, because people are like, no, he's, I'm not saying I agree with everything that Piers Morgan says or does, but let's just say he's necessary evil. He's important for the
Yeah.
culture, and he's important for the dialogue, because he's willing to ask those daring questions, those thought-provoking questions, and he's not afraid to be politically. He's not afraid to not be politically correct when he has these conversations, because after he left Good Morning Britain and his replacements came on, who were a lot more PC, who were a lot more polite and civilized in their approach and how they navigate their interviews. Tell me a single Good Morning Britain interview that's gone viral on YouTube to your belonging. The views
No,
have drastically
I'm on
gone
Twitter
down.
now. They don't. Nothing pops up. It used to be
Nothing.
every other week.
Yeah,
He would say something.
yeah. Piers Morgan saying something or is challenging something, and again, it's not necessarily like you have to play good cop, bad cop. And I think it's Suzanne who was his co-host. I think it was Suzanne. She was
Hmm.
able to play the good cop. She was able to bring it back when it was pushing too far. But you need someone who's willing, who's daring enough to be able to bend that barrier, who's willing to cross that line and
Mm.
push the margin, because he's doing so well on his new show, because he's willing to ask people, you know, why the hell do you think like this? Why the hell are you doing this? You know, he's willing to really dig at an Andrew Tate. He's willing to have a Jordan Peterson. He's willing to challenge a Kanye West on his ideas and like say, no, you need to apologize for this. This is stupid. He's willing to have an Alex Jones and all these people. and there's dialogue and there's conversation, and you can now better understand the person, why they act the way they are, and why they do what they do and stand by what they stand. And it's something that, like, when you're talking about how opposites attract, to go back when I was standing by how opposites attract, again, it's not just something that can be applied on a romantic level. It's something that can be applied on a social level. You have, like I said, I think for the most part, the majority of the people in the world are roughly scattered somewhere along the center. They might steer off a little bit to the left, they might steer off a little bit to the right. But for the greater part of it, they are
reasonable.
they're reasonable and they're willing. And then the people with the most polarizing takes and opinions that get the most attention, seldom are they willing to come over to the other side, or have the other side come over to them and sit down and talk and discuss some of these things. So, that bridge won't be gapped. The potential likelihood for progress and to get to some sort of mutual understanding and agreement will never ever take off, because these opposites aren't willing to attract each other. They're not willing to sit down and discuss and converse these things. So the gap just keeps getting bigger and bigger. And with what we've just already spoken about, you have these people like, no, if you go to that side, or your ally side with yourself, you're the enemy. Or if you go to that side and switch over, you're an idiot. Oh, you agree with this person. Wow.
Causes a lot of drama, man. It causes a lot of drama. I guess, like, what really comes up for me when you're saying that, I was listening to Ray Dalio and Tony Robbins, and they came up with a theory that every 20 years the world goes through a transformation. It goes through a revolution. And I think it's like every 60 to 80 years or something like that, there's been some form of world war. There's been some form of catastrophe. And the only reason why I touched on that is because I was thinking, well, aren't those 20% on either side needed? Because aren't those 20% the people who actually end up becoming leaders of the world? Aren't they the people that just have looked at life and they've just come to a decision about how it is that they feel is the best way to live life, because that's what they experienced, or that's what they experienced the opposite, and the opposite didn't work. And like, isn't it necessary to have those polarizing, contrasting difference? And isn't it necessary, I guess, I'm just playing devil's advocate here, because obviously I don't want this, isn't it necessary to reset the world every now and again? Because, like, just think of this chaos, like what you said before, like things get to a high peak point, and let's say with, I don't know, what's a like the summer of love, right? The summer of love became all those they're baby boomers, right? All of the baby boomers, boom, have a summer of love, climate change this, climate change that, and then end up being corporate bankers that completely destroy the world, So isn't it a necessary evil to have both polarizing, because you see the benefits and also negatives of one side, such as the baby boomers not ever going to work, right? And enjoying life and finding out that no purpose in life equals no money, or equals such a poor living standards, and then shifting to the complete opposite extreme of becoming pure hungry capitalists that are willing to do whatever they can and betray their own moral values to earn a quick buck.
Off the top of my head, I would say no. Because it depends how the reset is carried out.
Most of the time, 99% of the time, it's war, bro.
And that's not good. And if you have a basic understanding of history, and you know that history repeats itself, some of the ways that some of these movements have been carried out, especially if you have postmodernistic, neo-Marxist stance on the world, I don't think if that's the side that's carrying out the reset, it's going to be good for anyone. Because people who have those postmodernistic, neo-Marxist ideologies and beliefs, they are going to be, and they're very much in power right now, they are the people who are saying that group identity is more important than the individual. They are the people who are saying it's either you're with us or you're against us. And if you're against us, we're coming for you. And there have been so many times in history that's happened. Think of communist Russia. There was basically the kulaks. I think this was in just before the Second World War, in around about the 1930s. If you, in Russia, if you had a little bit of land, and you had 2 or 3 cattle, nothing crazy, and you had your little allotment there, a little bit of plantation, that was considered stupid amount of wealth, and in your small community, in your what's smaller than a village? I know I got a C in geography, but whatever smaller than a village, you were really idolized. That's the one who's giving back to our people, who's giving back to our community. That's the one who's helping us out. And then there then became a group of people who would be like, that person is stealing from you. That person has more than you should have. That person is your enemy. And what happened is they rounded up these very small number of hyper successful people in the community and basically shunned them and cast them out of society. And what ended up happening was because they were the ones who were producing most of the produce, 20 million Russians and Ukrainians ended up starving to death because it was now translated into an oppressor-oppressed state. And actually, no, at that time, it wasn't oppressor-oppressed. That's now the postmodernistic stance. It was working-class capitalist. You are perceived as a capitalist. And, yeah, it's that thing of, you have more than us. You have more than us. You're exploiting us and taking what's ours. And when they took back what's theirs.
Yeah.
And then if you look at Mao's China, 60 to 120 million people died under Mao's regime. And that's a big, it's estimated between 60 to 120. That's a big margin. That's not
that's 60 million people margin, bro. That's a lot of death.
Even if it was just 60 million, it would be that's still pretty bad. But it's estimated from 60 million to 120 million. So, yeah, especially if it turns into a situation where these authoritarian demagogues who believe in a postmodern neo-Marxist way of looking at the world and dealing with people, where it's either you're with us or against us, that's going to be a bad way of having a reset, a very, very bad and detrimental way.
I completely agree with you. I completely agree with you. Yeah, I believe, I guess you could say, a reset would come either way, and the very process of the reset, as I said, things happen in 20-year cycles, right? So by the time when a reset occurs, we'll be going through that reset for 20 years and then come out the other end of that reset 40 years later, right? So or 60 to 80 years later. So I guess it's terrible. I'm just trying to gather my thoughts here, because when you're speaking, a lot of things came through my mind. So, yeah, so looking at the history books, these things occur. And if these things occur on a certain period, it means that they're inevitable. It means that it means that they're inevitably going to happen. And if we both have the knowledge that they're inevitably going to happen, right, why is it that you take an apolitical stance to stick it on you, right? Why is it that you take an apolitical stance, or are you taking an apolitical stance to direct your energy in a different light that still can aid to I guess aid to supporting the human race, or are you focusing on your own Maslow's hierarchy of needs?
I think that life is ultimately suffering, and it's inevitable. We are born not being the elite specimens we could be. We are born with ailments, inabilities, disadvantages. We get old and we die. The people around us get old and die. And ultimately, there's nothing we can do in the long run that will at least change the dying part. With technology and improvements along the way, there are things that we can do to counteract those ailments, those shortcomings, disabilities, diseases, and illnesses. But ultimately, we're born into this world and we die. I think that the best thing that you can do is work on yourself. And as opposed to telling the world what's wrong, work on yourself and you'll have an imminent impact on the world, not just for yourself, but for the people around you. Because some of the things that we talk about and that we've discussed, they're extremely complex and complicated things. There are people who are much more learned and well-versed in these conversations than we are, who are even perplexed at how to find the answers. But that doesn't mean you can't do the world any good by becoming a better version of yourself, becoming the most optimal version of yourself, you know. I don't have beef with climate change, but I'll tell you a little story. I have a very basic, maybe just above average, but nothing extraordinary on climate change. And there was basically a friend of mine who reposted onto a story, you know, the same spew that normally is regurgitated and reposted onto Instagram stories, where it was talking about how much of the ice has melted in the Antarctica and how serious it's getting. And she then captioned under her repost, "Why is no one talking about this?" And I sent her a link to Bjorn Lornberg. If you don't know who Bjorn Lornberg is, he's the foremost in the climate crisis, and he is a Nobel Peace Prize winner and economist. And what happened was him and a group of other economists, scientists, and Nobel Peace Prize winners were summoned by the UN to go into small groups to figure out what the best way is to combat climate change. And they ended up coming out with a UN 200 list of things that they need to address in order to help combat climate change. And I mean, 200 is a lot. That's a wish list. So it was a lot of things. And to cut a long story short, directly addressing global warming didn't make it on the list of 200. What happened was, what they found out was that if we help improve the living standards and help better improve the gross domestic product of less economically developed countries, that will hopefully help people have more ethical and practical ways of, you know, creating fuel, as opposed to burning coal, and so on. And I sent this to my friend, and she was enraged. And because it didn't fit her narrative on that there's something that we can do. And I was like, look, I'm not coming at you. I'm actually trying to help you to better understand. These are people who have no political agendas or affiliation in this movement, in this issue. These are the most well-versed, most well-knowledgeable, experienced people that you can imagine who have come out with this information. These are legit, genuine Nobel Peace Prize winners, economists, scientists who are saying, look, if we want to get the world into a better place, maybe if we increase the gross domestic product in these less economically developed countries, then maybe by doing that, maybe we can create a genius in the next 10 years who can help fix this. And she didn't like that because it didn't fit her narrative. It didn't fit what she wanted to hear. The problem is, I believe, is a lot of these problems, again, these very valid, real problems, are very complicated. And people don't want to accept that complicated problems require complex and complicated solutions to said problems. You can't just put a bandage over a great gouging wound, you know. It requires time, effort, and analysis. And the moment that not necessarily someone has a dissenting perspective on it, but even just a perspective that's slightly different or that deviates from the path and direction of how you want things to go, it becomes a problem. And the other issue with a lot of these problems and some of these conversations is we have a lot of people in positions of power who aren't well versed and credible or knowledgeable enough to be speaking on these things. And again, not to say that I am, you know, the most insightful and intellectual being on all these conversations we've spoken about, but you'll be shocked to know that a lot of people who have a good understanding, a rational perspective, a healthy approach and understanding of these things, no one knows about them. And I'm saying this because we get pop culture icons, celebrities, rappers, and musicians like Cardi B, like
Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Yeah, Chelsea Handler, who are telling you why you should vote for said president, candidate for presidency, and telling you why you shouldn't vote for this. And again, I am a purist in freedom of speech. Everyone should have their right to speak their mind and say how they feel about things, speak on matters, because ultimately that's what we're doing right now. We're just two friends who are talking on things that they don't necessarily know everything about, but it helps the dialogue. But it can get to a point where you just have people saying things that you want to hear. And that's my biggest worry with not just the state of the political socio landscape, but the landscape as a whole. You know, we're being cotton-wooled and mollycoddled into this mindset that everything is going to be okay as long as we hear that everything is going to be okay. And we're not necessarily well equipped and combated to face the harsh conditions of the climate of real life.
Well, I'd have to beg to differ. I think that we are nothing but being smacked in the face with just a disastrous future. You know, I don't think I think the reason why people like Greta Thunberg and other political activists exist like that is because it seems as if they've painted a picture as if everything isn't going to be okay. And I just have to happen to be of the mind that it will be okay. It might not be okay straight away, but it definitely will be in the long term.
Well, like I said, it's not just, again, on the political socio front, it's with life in general. We're now raising a generation and a people where they don't know how to accept losing. You know, in primary schools and nurseries, you get medals and badges for being a participant. You know, in America, it's become greatly common that in certain sports, they don't keep track of the score just so that the losing side isn't embarrassed and shamed.
Whoa.
You know,
that's the first time I've ever heard of that.
And you need, like I said, you need to accept that life is suffering. You need to accept that the world is harsh, and that helps you better combat the world. And look at how these people are now talking and how they are dealing with defeat. You know, some of the greatest success stories talk about resilience. They talk about the hardships and the pain that they had to endure and overcome. We now see this again, like I said, it's not just in the political state. I think it's all around. You know, a lot of movies now, you know, the protagonist doesn't really have to overcome anything. You know, especially in this rise of women empowerment, you know, I'm not disregarding, I'm not disputing, I'm not undermining the necessity and the importance of women empowerment and the women's movement. But you get these storylines in these movies and in these films where they're trying so hard to empower women that they're actually damaging, you know, some of the beauty of great storytelling. You see some of these female superheroes that don't have to prevail or overcome any real challenge. They are automatically instantly great. They have nothing that they have to work and strive for because they're already great at everything. And I think that translates into everyday life, you know, and telling people that everything is going to be okay and you are brilliant the way you are, and a great emphasis on the latter part of that statement, is as reassuring as that sounds. I think it could be extremely detrimental, because if you are great the way that you are, there's no room for improvement. There's no need to self-analyze yourself and reflect and reassess, work on, build and conquer, because everything's okay. You are great the way you are. You know, it's like,
you know, how I always break that down, right, is that I always break it down as like who you are as a person. Yeah, you are great. You are fine as a person. However, the roles that you attach yourself to, let's say you are a typewriter for a law firm and you type down the minutes, right? And the name of the game is accurately type out as many words as you possibly can a minute. Right? You could start and you can only type out about 20 words a minute, meaning that you're not capturing that meeting at all. Does that mean you're a bad person? No. What it does mean, though, is that you're not the best at your job right now. So you have to improve at your job. And it's not diminishing you as a human being or as a person yourself, but it means that the act that you are omitting, that you're committing to, that you said that you want to do, it means that you're not good at that. And I feel like people conflate the difference, because intrinsic worth as a human being, I think it exists. Yeah, I think people conflate intrinsic worth to being good at conflict resolution, being good at having conversations with other people that have different opposing viewpoints. They conflate their ability to, or their inability to complete those tasks with their self-worth, with who they are as a person. And I think that lack of division, that lack of understanding, and I think that lack of that understanding comes with exactly what you're saying, which is, oh, the world is a dark, dark place. Prepare yourself for it. And if you have that preparation, you understand the difference of like, I'm doing my best, but maybe my best isn't good enough right now, and so on and so forth.
Well, yeah, it's exactly that, and it goes back to that thing you're saying about when I was touching on why I think that if you choose to focus on yourself and work on yourself, it's imminently more effective and powerful than to point at the world and to blame everyone else for the downfall of humanity and the state of the world. Because if you are being told that everything is okay and you are great the way that you are, then again, reiterating my point for the upteenth time, then you don't need to work on yourself. You don't need to improve on yourself. You just point the finger at everyone else. And I don't think that's healthy because, again, like I said earlier, and again to reiterate for the upteenth time, some of the problems and some of the things that we've been discussing, these very valid, real issues that I'm not, again, invalidating, they require complex answers and solutions. They're things that, reposting onto your story or tweeting about isn't going to do enough. You have to be a slave to some of these things. You have to stand through it, even when the hype has died down, even when it's not being talked about. Because again, the war in Ukraine is still going on. The war in Libya is still going on. The war in Syria is still going on. In Libya, there's still the slave in most of North Africa. The slave trade is still thriving. On top of that, the climate crisis is still manifesting into something even more catastrophic. So it's that, there's this, not to get biblical and not to preach, but there's this story in the Bible where Jesus is asking everyone, why do you pay attention to the speck of sawdust in another person's eye when you don't pay attention to the plank of wood in your own eye? And it's very easy to look at, another person's shortcomings, but what about your own? And if you address those, it makes an instant positive effect on the world. So yeah, it's the thing is, with some of these causes and some of these plights, they're a quick route to moral virtue, and it's very easy to jump on these trends. It's very easy to look at some of the leaders of the world and these politicians, these ministers, and say they're corrupt and they're fallen. And yeah, for the most part, they are 110%. I completely agree. I would know from where I was born. That's very much true. And yeah, some of, I can imagine it must be very, very difficult to run a state, govern a country, and all these things in between. So yeah, I do think that, to teach people that the world is tough and it's suffering, it's very true, because the thing is, I'm not saying this from a nihilistic standpoint. I do believe that we can transcend past the doom and the gloom into something beautiful and remarkable. But I think in a lot of people's life, there's a lot of suffering. And I think some people, especially the older folk, can probably agree to the idea that there's probably a lot more suffering, there's a lot more gray area than there is wonderful moments in life. So
yeah, I think I think that is it. And that comprehension will only come by actually enduring the tough times and coming out the other end. Like you were saying earlier in the conversation, people reach a point where things are going so well in terms of becoming so progressive that they actually end up falling back in themselves, and they end up going back on their going back on what it is they set out to actually do. And I'm imagining that's because people become more controlling, people become more restrictive. You know, when you're creating something from a startup, you're like, okay, there's no rules. All we're trying to do is grow something as fast as we possibly can. Right. But when you get to a point where you've grown so big from a 3-person organization to 500-person organization, you now need rules to how the company is going to operate, how people are going to communicate with each other so that things streamline. And if there isn't that streamline, the company's going to crash. And even so, with that streamlinization, it's no longer going to be a community feel. It's going to feel like you're in a city. You're not going to know everyone. You're going to be actually detached from the world. And eventually a lot of people might feel like, oh, this is very restrictive, very, very controlling, you know? So I think it's,
well, you see,
it's a shame.
That's why I say that, you know, that exact analogy you just gave, that's why I say that there is important need for the left and the right, because
yes,
basically, if you are, and I think I said this in our first conversation, I don't like to look at liberal and conservative just in the political perspective. I like to look at them in temperament perspective. So if you are liberal, you're a lot more creative. You know, you're very you're willing to think of new ways to better the world, to improve ideas. You're full of all these ingenious ideas and ways to better improve the world, or even just for your own personal self. And then if you're more conservative in thinking, you know, you like to have order, you like to have structure, you don't have the ability to create these ideas, but you better yet know how to run and manage them, which is why you'll find a lot of founders for a lot of businesses and companies will be very much liberal in temperament, but then like the chief officer, the manager will be very much conservative, because they have that traditional approach to have that structure and that order to approach things. So again, yeah, there is beauty in, you know, both sides of the spectrum. They're necessary in every single way, because on the political side of things, I feel like, and again, I'm not saying that conservatives should run. I'm not saying that at all. But conservatives, or people who have a conservative temperament, better yet, are there to maintain law and order. And then the left are there to say, we're here to fight for the oppressed and the marginalized. And we're here to point out when this state, this government, this system becomes tyrannical and it becomes corrupt.
Yeah. I guess you didn't finish your tangent on climate change, right? And I'm more than fascinated about what you had to say about climate change and what you had to say about the Nobel Prize winners coming together and discovering that actually the best way to potentially solve climate change is going to the less developed countries and developing those countries, so that there is so that's as far as much as I got from that conversation. But yeah, I'd really love for you to just like go in a bit more in depth into that. Because I share similar ideas, but I've never heard it expressed in the way that you're expressing it.
Okay. So, so what happened was, Bjorn Lomborg is a well-known and the foremost climate researcher and scientist. He's an economist and he's a Nobel Peace Prize winner. Him and a team of fellow Nobel Peace Prize winners, economists, scientists, were given the task by the United Nations to figure out how to combat climate change, like what's the best way forward. And they basically created a list called the UN wish list of 200 things that they could do to help better improve the state of the world. And I think they were given something like $20 trillion or something or thereabouts. And that wasn't even enough money to help resolve this issue. But what they did find was that within this list, directly addressing the climate catastrophe and the climate crisis didn't even make the list. The best way to address the climate catastrophe was to inadvertently address other things, like improve the living standard in less economically developed standards and help better improve the gross domestic product of those less economically developed countries.
Mhm.
And I'm not well versed in this conversation. I don't have the answers, but the issue is that a lot of people that we have our biases in how we take our information, you know, similar to what we like to search on YouTube and similar to what we listen to and what we don't listen to, what we would like to read and what we don't like to read. It goes hand in hand. Sometimes we do want to hear, and even probably myself, and even in my field of profession and what I know, sometimes I don't want to hear the dissenting opinion or to figure out that everything that I've been doing up until this point is wrong and the dissenting approach to it is the right approach. You know, because we have our own biases and it's something that, you know, we need to get better at. But yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So I guess this is a real perfect segue to just jump into what it is that you do. Obviously, we touched on you being a model slightly last conversation, but recently, over the past maybe 6 to 8 months, I've started to realize that you're a fitness coach and you help people. What's your slogan? What's your slogan?
Can we talk about
what's the slogan? Everything. I'd like to talk about both. If you're not comfortable talking about it, obviously, we don't have to, bro. But I'd love to include that in there.
I've got 16% of battery as well.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So just jump into the journaling.
The journaling. Okay, so through personal conversations that we've had between ourselves, I think one thing that stood out for me is how much you journal and how thorough you are with your journaling, and how so what I'd like to ask you and for you to share with everyone else is, how do you journal? How does journaling support you? What does it do for you? And how does it help you become better? Because I assume it does. Otherwise, why would you do it, right?
I think there's two parts to that answer. The first part and the most important part is I started to journal because what I've discovered with journaling and what I understood prior was that journaling, or just writing in general, it helps you better formulate your thoughts and ideas, and you are then later on able to convey them in quite an articulate manner when you are saying them verbally. That was one of the main reasons why I started journaling. Because, as I said, I'm of the belief that thinking is very much an external process, and writing is an external process. And it's actually quite difficult. Internal thinking is very much valid, but it's a lot easier because, as we hinted on earlier, you know, there are conversations that you have by yourself, whether you're listening to music, in the shower, before you go to bed, meditating, and in your mind, you know, you are formulating these ideas so coherently, so efficiently, but then when you come to put them out into the world, it's a much more taxing process that's not as efficient and as smooth as you would like. And again, that's the beauty of freedom of speech and just having your thoughts out into the world. You get better at formulating your ideas, and the more you do it, the better you get at it. So it's more of a mental exercise with my thoughts that is being put out into the world externally. And then the other thing, it's a very cheap, healthy form of self-therapy and self-help. When I journal, I just like to think of something that's going on in my life, or even just like a topic point. Like, is life suffering? What am I grateful for? What am I not grateful for? And I just like to expand on as many points as I possibly can till I've run out of ideas, and then I go on to the next, and then the next, and then the next, and then the next. And I think it's good to also use that as an opportunity to self-reflect and to analyze yourself, as I mentioned, because it's very easy to look at the world and to look at everyone else and point out their shortcomings and their flaws. But it's even harder to look at yourself and to look at your shortcomings and your flaws. And because we've become mollycoddled and cotton-wooled into being told that we're perfect and we're great the way we are and everything is going to be okay, how will we then be able to accept ourselves when we then see something wrong with us? And I don't think it's a reality that a lot of people are willing to accept, or that they are prepared to accept if it was to come their way. Because it's, oh, he's harmless. Oh, he could never do any wrong. He's an angel. He's a sweetheart. I think that a good man is not a harmless man. A good man is a very dangerous man who has that under voluntary control, which means that no matter what happens, no matter what comes his way, even though he has the ability to release that chaos, he knows that it's not the best solution, it's not the best outcome. There's another famous saying where it's better to be a war in a garden than to be a garden in a war. I think it goes hand in hand very well. And Jocko Willink spoke about it very, very well. You know, some of these people that we deem harmless and innocent, when they face rejection, how does that translate into the world? You know, you hear about these school shooters in America. You know, they were harmless boys. You know, they didn't get into any fights. They just kept themselves, minded their business. But then look at what they do. But then you look at those, you know, guys that go to the gym, that go to MMA, that go to Muay Thai, that go to hip, you know, they have that. And people may not like that analogy or think that it's meaningless. So the one thing that I like about, you know, stories and fables is that we can seek truth from them, you know, because sometimes fictitious stories can be more relatable than real everyday life. You know, that's why stories like Shakespeare, stories from Shakespeare rather, A Midsummer Night's Dream, Macbeth, movies like The Fault in Our Stars, where they talk about cancer and stuff, even though they're fictitious, they resonate with us so dearly because they're so relatable to everyday life. And with the whole notion and narrative about a good man is not a harmless man, a good man is a very dangerous man who has that under voluntary control, is you look at, you know, stories like, let's just say, I don't know, Superman, Clark Kent. He is this person who has the ability and the capabilities to wreak havoc and mayhem upon the world, but he has accepted his powers, he's accepted his pros, his cons, his great strengths and his great weaknesses, and he chooses to have them constantly under control even when things don't go against him. And yeah, it's just a healthy way of just being able to look at yourself and to really ponder and ask yourself, am I okay? Is everything that I'm doing okay? Am I going about life the right way? Am I not going about life the right way? With no external party judging you or overlooking you, and it's just really helped, and it's been something truly, truly amazing. Because I think it's one of those things where if you're able to face your deepest, darkest demons, your secrets, your ailments, your shortcomings, everything that's wrong with you, then you can overcome any trial and tribulation that comes your way. And because if you can conquer your own flaws and your problems, your demons, your challenges, and prevail, then what's to stop you? Because the only thing that's stopping you in life is your own problems. It's not going to be Washi's problems that are stopping Leslie from becoming great. It's everything in my life. And yeah, I think it's something. It's a really good tool, and it's extremely, extremely healthy, because where you are most scared to look is where you'll find what you're looking for. And I like the story of King Arthur looking for the Holy Grail with his knights. So King Arthur and his knights are sat at the round table. It's round because, they're all equal, roughly speaking. And they decide to embark on the adventure of looking for the Holy Grail. And they enter the woods where, roughly speaking, the Holy Grail is situated. And they all enter the woods at a point of they all enter the woods from a point which is darkest to them from their own individual perspective. And they find it, kind of thing. And it's that call to adventure, and it's that call and that ambition to go to the depths, the deepest, darkest depths that you really don't want to go to, but you have to. A lot of these issues that we're facing, if what we fear, what we resent in the other side, if we're able to combat that, or if we're at least able to see it in ourselves and address it, then yeah, instantly we've made progress. We've made a better change for the greater good. Which is why I always say, like, it's more efficient. It's so much more pro-efficient to sit down, reflect, and look at what's wrong with you. And if you get your house in order, if you get your act together, it will imminently affect the world in a more positive light.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, man. I couldn't agree more. Like, if you start to feel better, other people around you will start to feel better around you, and you'll be ultimately more confident, more brave, happier, being able to make a difference in the world without having to necessarily second guess yourself, So, yeah, I think that's really, really beautiful. And I get that, like, journaling helps you organize your thoughts, recover your thoughts, and also at the same time it helps you discover who it is that you are, and unearth your inauthenticities and also your greatness as well, which is really powerful. And to I guess to end the podcast as we did last time, we didn't talk too much about you, but what do you think is going to become of the world in the next, 6 to 12 months? Since there's a war right next door that we can't anticipate too much.
I don't know. I always want to look at the world and the state of the world in a healthy scope, because for the most part things have been relatively great than we're led to believe. Because the biggest issue with some of these movements and some of these problems is that we're led to believe that things are way worse than they actually are. And this is where you could say that I'm a bit optimistic and maybe even a bit naive. I think that the state of the world is significantly better than it was 60 years ago. I think the living standards in less economically developed countries, especially in Africa, are now at the rate of what European countries would have been in the 1960s. That's a fact that doesn't get looked over. And the technological advancements that have happened, you know, we've got so many assets and innovations that are at our disposal, that are at our assets that we take for granted. You know, again, I think I said this on the last conversation we had.
Podcast.
The standard of living in 1895 was $1.75 a day. You know, most people are earning more than that. Unfortunately, there's still a great deal of people who aren't. But yeah, I think there is hope, and I think there is a great likelihood that things will get better. Again, I'm not ashamed to say there's some things that I don't know the answers to. I don't know how the war will pan out. I have no idea. I don't know if me and you are going to have to be shipped off to war. But hey, we'll cross that bridge when we get to it, I suppose.
Exactly. Listen, mate, thank you so much for being here with me today. We'll definitely have another one and another one and another one. And keep on. Sorry?
The streets want more in the same season.
Yeah, we can do that. But yeah, thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for updating us on your change of perspective, change of mind, and I guess also spewing out a bit of hope at the end there of how the world is actually looking a lot better than what people perceive it to look as, or like, one of those two.
Okay, no worries, my man. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Anytime, man. Anytime. Speak soon.